Okay, so let's talk about the case first before we get into our live interview, which I am very, very thankful is Allison Feldman's father, who's going to be joining us here. He's standing by. But this is Allison that you're seeing on your screen. She was 31 years old. She went to the U of A, and she was living in Scottsdale back in 2015. Very successful. She did medical sales. She had a very steady relationship with her boyfriend, Alex. There was so much that was going for her. She was very close with her family. And by all counts, Allison kind of had that picture perfect life that so many people wanted. I love the sunshine in Arizona. Things were going well. But in 2015, things took a complete tragic turn that nobody ever could have seen coming. Allison was found brutally murdered inside her own home on February 17th, 2015. That's when she was killed. And this wasn't just a shooting or anything like that. Allison was raped, she was beaten, and she was strangled to death. And the crime scene was honestly one of the worst in terms of it was so widespread. We learned from detectives and recently just how much DNA and blood and items and pieces of evidence were all over Allison's house, both inside and outside, to the point where even part of her hair was around part of a beer bottle at the bottom of her swimming pool. The struggle seemed immense, and it was clear that Allison put up a fight with her killer. But she was eventually pronounced dead because of all of her injuries. Now, at the time, nobody knew that Allison had been killed, but her boyfriend, Alex Stone, had been texting her, calling her that night, didn't hear back, but thought maybe she was busy getting ready for a travel trip, as she did often with her job. And so the next day, he was studying, and he tried to contact her multiple times, and eventually got concerned enough to go to her house. And he was actually the one to find her. And you're going to hear from him here in just a bit. The thing about this case is Scottsdale police, I mean, they questioned everybody, you know, the UPS man, a contractor, the landscapers. I mean, they were contacting anybody who would want to have killed Allison Feldman and who got into her house. It didn't seem to be any signs of forced entry, but clearly somebody made their way in there and had time to do this. This case went cold for years, and it was one of those high-profile cold cases where every year we'd revisit this case. Do you know anything about Allison Feldman's death? And hope for more. But again, that time frame of 2015 was just about the time that familial DNA, genetic genealogy, was starting to become a much bigger use of technology within crime cases. And obviously now, 10 years later, we've seen so many solved this way. Allison's case is not unlike those. So when the case goes cold, Scottsdale Police turns to the Arizona DPS, the Department of Public Safety, to try familial DNA. It was something that was newer in Arizona at the time, and they thought that this would be the perfect case to give that a go. They get a match back that shows a hit or a close familial hit to a man named Mark Mitcham, who was incarcerated at the time. This hit showed that whoever the assailant was in Allison's murder was a very close family match. And so they started looking at, did Mark have other brothers and his dad? And as they whittled down kind of through his family ties, they came to his brother, Ian Mitcham. And they start looking at Ian thinking, maybe this is our guy. So this is where this kind of gets a little bit unusual, or I guess I should say a lot bit unusual for a crime case. Ian Mitcham had a DUI within Scottsdale Police also in 2015, and his DNA was part of that case. They had taken it for a blood sample, you know, to try to discern what his blood alcohol content level was. And in Scottsdale Police, the protocol there was that after the DUI case, after 90 days of having somebody's DNA, their blood, they would get rid of it. Well, they went back in their system after they got this familial hit to Mark Mitcham's brother and said, oh, we still have Ian Mitcham's DNA in our system. It wasn't thrown out. Let's use that to test it against this DNA sample that was at the crime scene. Scottsdale Police did not get a search warrant to do that. They had it in their system, they used it, and lo and behold, direct match to the crime scene DNA that was on Allison herself and on the crime scene inside her house, the blood that was left there, everything like that. And Ian Mitcham is arrested for first-degree murder. Now, things started going kind of swimmingly from there because now you've got this person in custody, of course, a million questions at that point. And to this day, nobody knows any sort of relationship or connection between Allison Feldman and Ian Mitcham, which was shocking to everybody because it is so rare that you have a random crime like that, a stranger that actually kills somebody in that manner, especially. Well, Ian Mitcham's defense team brought up that his DNA was not lawfully obtained by Scottsdale police because they didn't have a warrant to do so, and his DNA should have been out of the system by the time that they used it. This went back and forth in the Arizona courts and the appeals courts and went all the way up to the Arizona Supreme Court. Somewhat recently, it was actually my first time in the Supreme Court. And this was going to be telling. It was going to be whether his DNA could be used in this case. And this is the crux of the prosecution's case. So it was exceptionally important for the prosecution to get this win. The Arizona Supreme Court did rule that Scottsdale police should have gotten rid of that DUI sample. They should not have had that. However, something saved this case, and that was called the law of inevitable discovery. Ian Mitcham not only had the DUIs, he also ended up pleading guilty and being convicted of other felonies that were unrelated, and that happened in 2022. When you are convicted of felonies in Arizona, your DNA automatically goes into the system. So back in 2017, 2018, when they were doing the familial DNA and they got his match, they would have eventually gotten to Ian Mitcham because inevitably his DNA would have been in the system once he was convicted of those felonies. And that is what the Supreme Court said. They would have gotten to this point anyway, just a few years later. This is admissible. DNA is going to be used and you can go forward with trial. So that's what happened. And that brings us to this week, nearly 11 years after the case finally going to trial for the murder of Allison Feldman. You can see Ian on your screen here. Honestly, looks like part of his defense team. He's in normal clothes and a suit. And so it is interesting to watch him interact. At times, he almost is smiling kind of with his team. It isn't what you typically see when you might see a defendant come in shackles and an orange jumpsuit, which really changes what the defense side looks like. But the prosecution is who started with opening statements, and they said that Ian Mitcham was the one who brutally beat and slain Allison Feldman that day in 2015. They also said outside of the DNA match that is a direct match to Mitcham's, they said his black Mustang was in the area of the time of the murder, and that he also deposited a very large amount of money at a nearby ATM to where Allison lived. They said he did not often deposit large sums of money, so that was unusual behavior. They also gave us a little insight into Ian's personal life at the time. They said he was engaged, that his relationship, though, was failing. He had a young daughter, and that he was really having financial struggles and financial woes. He spent a lot of time drinking, not a lot of time at home, and that was kind of plaguing his life at the time. The part that I actually found to be one of the more chilling aspects of the opening statements from the prosecution is how they described the crime scene, not so much in what was left, though that was pretty eye-opening, but they said that Ian Mitcham spent hours inside Allison's home while she was naked and dead in her hallway, cleaning with bleach, an overwhelming amount of bleach, to try to erase what was there. And I want you to listen to the prosecutor, Aaron Otis, describe what they saw.
Her killer left with the daunting task of having to eliminate any evidence of having ever been inside her house. After the murder, he searched the kitchen, the laundry room, and the guest bathroom for items that he could find to clean the scene. He wiped and mopped up some of the blood off the floor. He sprayed down door handles and knobs of places that he had touched while he was inside the home. And he poured bleach over the crime scene, including over Allison's body and her dress, to try to eliminate any of his DNA. In fact, Allison's killer spent the next several hours inside her home, attempting to eliminate any evidence that could eventually allow the police to connect him to what he had just done.
This was crazy to me because typically, I mean, we're talking somebody who does not know the victim, brutally ended her life. You would think that person would try to get out of the crime scene as fast as possible. I mean, to spend hours in there and make himself available to whoever came by, that's an overwhelming smell as well. I mean, there were so many times where somebody could catch him. That was bold. That was bold of him to stay in there and do that. And something that I thought was really stunning in court, we weren't allowed to broadcast or show the crime scene photos, but they showed them in court. And they put like an agent over the ground there that would show what would have been blood before the bleach was put down. And it was kind of like almost like a blue light type of substance that they used with a light. This place just lit up. I mean, you could see that there was blood smeared everywhere and then tried to be cleaned up with that bleach. And that was pretty disturbing in and of itself. So you had the openings, right? They're resting on DNA. Ian's DNA was at the crime scene, a direct match. DNA is king in crime cases like this. But the defense team really went a different direction. So they even tried to say that DNA tells you the who, but it doesn't tell you the how or the when, that it only is part of the story. I thought that was an interesting tactic by the defense, but none more interesting than them telling the court and the jury that Scottsdale police got the wrong guy and that Allison's pharmacist is to blame for her death. That was the first time I had heard that. And then they explained what they meant by that. They basically looked at everything else about the crime scene, about the killing itself outside of the DNA and said, all of this evidence really more so points to her pharmacist being the perpetrator if you don't look at the DNA and you look at every other piece in this case, which is definitely odd and interesting. So I want to play for you what the defense said about the pharmacist and the evidence at the crime scene that they believe fit him as the killer.
Till July of 2016, the Scottsdale Police Department received information from another call from other parties that they had learned of some information or about James Casamides. And they told the Scottsdale police that he had made some concerning statements regarding the homicide. You're going to hear from his girlfriend that on occasion, he strangled her. He also tackled her, pushed her into a fridge. And guess what? He lived on 87th Street in Osborne, less than a half a mile from the victim. You're going to hear how he walked the alleys at night. And of course, drank the same beer that was at the scene.
Now, it's important to note the prosecution has ruled James Casanides out as a suspect in this case, but that is something that the defense is going to perpetrate as they move forward with this. This trial is supposed to last about 6 months. That's exceptionally long. This is a capital case. If convicted, Ian Mitcham could face the death penalty. And so I was curious who they were first going to call to the stand. There's so many witnesses in this case, and a lot of it will revolve around DNA found at the crime scene. But sometimes it's the medical examiner or whoever performed the autopsy that's called first. Sometimes it's police officers who responded. But in this case, it was Allison Feldman's boyfriend, Alex Stone. And that was testimony that I was really interested in hearing because, remember, it was years before Ian Mitcham was arrested for this crime. And a lot of people cast suspicion on Alex. He was the last one to see Allison. He was her boyfriend. And so often, you know, that's the first person that people suspect when a significant other is killed. But it was harrowing to not only listen to his testimony in court, but to listen to his 911 call. When he saw something was wrong, he was texting Allison, calling her, and we saw those texts in court. They were very loving. And he said, you know, I'm getting concerned. Hey, babe, is everything okay? And he went over there, and he's the one that found Allison. And he did describe the fact that when he walked in the house, the first immediate sign that something was wrong was the overwhelming smell of bleach and cleaning chemicals that was present that made absolutely no sense. But then he saw that a lot of furniture was moved. Things were all over. Clearly, something had gone wrong. I want to play part of the 911 call that he made to officers. This is just a snippet of it. I don't even know how many 911 calls I've heard in my life in this career. And this one shook me. I honestly feel like this was the worst 911 call I've heard, just with the agony in his voice. I want to play part of it so that you know what his reaction was in that moment.
911 emergency.
Oh my God, I just came over to my girlfriend's house and she's not breathing. Oh my God, give me just a second. My girlfriend is not breathing. I think she's dead.
What is right?
That was just a very small snippet. That went on for about 10 minutes in that courtroom. I mean, just awful, just awful. I mean, and he was trying to get the address out. You could hear it in his voice. And you didn't just hear it then, but you also heard it when he was talking to the prosecutor about how he found Allison. Remember, this was almost 11 years ago. And the way that he spoke, you could feel that pain has not gone away. I want to play when Alex Stone found Allison. And the reason you're not seeing his face is because they requested we only play his sound, not show his face, because this is a traumatic situation.
I made my way into the rest of the house.
Okay.
How I found her.
Okay. And when you say you found her, you're talking about Allison.
I found Alice on the floor with no clothes on.
Okay.
No clothes on. She was in a hallway.
And you mentioned that
she was in a hallway.
I'm sorry. Okay. And you mentioned that she had no clothes on?
She did not have any clothes on.
Were you able to see her face?
I was not. There was a rug over her face. I couldn't see her face.
Allison's boyfriend. I'm now joined by Allison's father, Harley Feldman. Harley, I know you've had to relive this week, and I just want to explain to our viewers, we are so thankful to have you on live. You've sat through opening statements. You've sat through today's testimony. This is going to be a long road, and you're still here live on our show. I appreciate you so much. And obviously, my heart's with you as you guys go through this. You have always been very strong for your daughter. A lot of people on this show might not know you've done so much advocacy for many years now, not only on Allison's case, but for many other victims as well. But for you to be in the courtroom now, almost 11 years later, and have to see these crime scene pictures and live this, how are you processing that in real time?
So I made two promises when Allison was murdered. One is that I'd work with the Scottsdale police to find her killer. And the second is to keep her legacy alive. And that's what I believe I'm doing. I was instrumental in helping make familial search legal in Arizona, which it wasn't at the time. And I feel really good about that because it's been used to solve other cases.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps me going. I'm doing this for Allison.
When you're sitting in the courtroom, are you zeroed in on who's on the stand? I mean, where do you keep your focus throughout this? You've got the jury, you've got the judge. It's a tense situation, especially when we're talking about your daughter.
So I spend most of my focus on listening to the witnesses because what they say is going to matter to the jury. And the jury is it's a cross section of Arizona, as you expect. And I didn't go to the interviews of the jurors, so I don't know much about them. Yeah. But they're listening, and they're going to have to make a decision. And it hit me when the jury walked in for the first time, and I realized they hold Ian's life in their hands, and it's real now. And so now I focus on what's going on. I talk to the prosecution quite often. Our detective is there every day. And I ask him questions. I make some comments if I think it's relevant. But it's hard. I knew all of this beforehand, but when you hear it out loud, people talking about the real case and the real things they saw, or the real things, the real charges, that was hard.
Yeah.
And I won't be there when they show the videos. I don't want to remember Allison in that state. I want to remember just like this.
Right. And I mean, we're seeing her here, and I know you've talked about it for years. She was so beautiful. She was so smart and successful. I mean, she really had it all. That was the first time that I had seen the crime scene photos yesterday. And a lot of families often leave the courtroom. You stayed. You stayed. How did you find the strength
I had my
to
eyes
be there?
closed.
You did.
I had my eyes closed during the pictures, and next week there'll be some videos, and I'll leave the courtroom for those.
Yeah. There's a few questions I want to get to, but just because we were coming off of Alex's sound bites there, have you had conversation with Alex in the years since? And what was that like for you, hearing him describe those moments in the courtroom?
So Alex and I remained friends for a couple of years, and I told him probably 3 or 4 years ago he had to move on with his life. Allison was around, but he called about 3 months ago and asked us to go out to dinner, and I subsequently had lunch with him, and so I maintain a relationship with Alex.
I mean,
We don't talk about the case at
yeah.
all, but we're still friends.
I mean, you could hear it in his voice that this was just
Dramatic.
so traumatic, so unimaginable. I truly think that's the worst 911 call I've ever heard. And I was there, and I don't want to call it comfort in this for you, but the care that he showed for your daughter in that moment seemed so raw and so genuine.
Well, we got to know Alex along the way. We lived in Minnesota at the time, and we used to visit Arizona fairly frequently. My wife is a flight attendant. And so we got to know Alex really well, and I always liked him, and he cared a lot about her. And that's why we're still friends today.
Yeah.
He's a really good guy. I felt really bad for him that he had to sit and listen to all that 911 calls and relive what he'd actually been through.
Yeah.
I know it had to be very hard on him.
I mean, you could tell. And there's quite a few people commenting here live, just showing strength and saying that they appreciate you and are thankful for you and all that you guys are doing for Allison. So please know that it is resonating, all of what you guys are doing. I want to ask you about the opening statements. The pharmacist, was that news to you? Did you know the defense was going to come out swinging with, hey, there's a whole nother guy and Scottsdale police got this wrong? Is there any truth to what they're saying in your mind?
No, I knew that this was coming because I talked to the prosecution. I personally don't believe any of it. The evidence is what the jury will look at, but it doesn't make any sense to me. And his DNA is not at the crime scene. I mean, that's probably what stands out the most.
Where did they come up with this pharmacist theory? I mean, I know they say that he liked the same beer and he made some concerning comments. Do we know what these concerning comments about the homicide were? I mean, they had to have something to try to make this fit.
So the neighborhood was under a lot of stress while this wasn't solved, and Scottsdale police took 170 DNA samples from around the neighborhood. So it was a topic of a conversation for a long time. And at a party one night, the pharmacist said, I did it. Just kidding. And the people at the party said, we should call this into Scottsdale police. And I don't blame him. It's a pretty strong comment. The neighborhood
Sure.
was all uptight. And so they called in. Scottsdale police sent a detective out, talked to him, took another DNA sample. They already had one from the first time around, and didn't find any match. So, they couldn't find any evidence to link him to the crime.
I I always find it interesting, which direction the prosecution and the defense goes in any trial. We obviously knew the prosecution was going to zero in on DNA being at the crime scene. I mean, that is the crux of a case almost every time. But I thought the comments from the defense were really interesting, how they almost sidetracked the DNA and said, well, it's only part of the story. It doesn't tell you when or how. And I know they're trying to plant reasonable doubt in the jurors' minds, but they certainly did not address how his DNA would have gotten there then otherwise. Do you know where they're going to go with that aspect? Because certainly people are going to wonder, the jurors, that's got to be their number one question.
I don't know where they're going to go. I think it's an issue that they'll have to address along the way because it's such an obvious fact, at least to me. The jury will have to decide what they see, but it doesn't hold together for me, and I'm sure along the way it's going to come out stronger and stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is going to be a really long trial. I know it's going to weigh on everybody for so many months. They mentioned it a little bit, but what are some of the witnesses that are going to testify that you know of? I know a lot of forensic techs and DNA and officers, but it's quite extensive, the witness list.
It is. I don't know all the names. I know there's two more Scottsdale detectives that are going to testify on Monday, and so am I. I'm on the stand on Monday. Allison's former boss is right behind me, and that's the extent that I know. But that's what's coming next week.
Okay, and that's good to know too. I think a lot of people will want to see what you have to say. I mean, you've been the leader of all of this. The part that I still don't understand is I still don't really understand a motive. Was it your understanding at all in listening to the opening statements that there was some sort of maybe alluding to the fact that he was financially down, that there were things taken from Allison's home that would have been like a financially robbing this house in person possible motive?
Yeah, I don't know either. My guess is it's either financial or he saw her somewhere, and she's a very pretty girl. The financial motive is the only thing that makes sense to me, but I don't know exactly where they're going to go, and I'm sure that'll come out more and more as the case evolves.
And we still don't know. Neither side seemed to present, at least with opening statements, any sort of rationale or explanation as to how Ian came across Allison. No matter what the motive was, we still don't know how he got to her, right?
Don't have any idea. My guess is that she frequented some place where he worked or whatever, but I don't know, and I'm not sure anybody knows why.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, let's say that he is found guilty of first-degree murder. This is a capital case and death penalties on the line. How do you feel about that? Would you want him to be sentenced to death? Would you prefer life in prison? Where do you personally feel and fall?
I watched the Boston Marathon trial with Tsarnaev, and the families there decided to not pursue the death penalty because they didn't want continual appeals going on for years. There was just a case settled in Arizona that took 30 years of appeals before they got to the real death penalty. So I don't know, but that length of time in dealing with appeals does weigh on me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and uniquely too, you've had to wait far longer than most to even get to trial after your daughter's death, and that's been a long road
Yeah.
in and of itself. Can you explain to people a little bit of the advocacy you've done? Because I mean, it is really incredible what you've done, really in Allison's name and for other victims. You've kind of been able to find this new purpose through her.
So I've gotten to be fairly well known for the familial DNA search. And I found out that 24 cases have been solved using familial search since it became legal. And I feel really good about that. I also am chapter leader for Parents of Murdered Children, an organization that shouldn't exist, but it does. And we help people through their grief. I've actually met with some people from the Mesa Police Department who said, you understand what our victims are going through, would you talk to them? And so I do that a lot. I still am co-facilitator of a grief group in Minnesota, which I attend by Zoom. And all of that is helping other people, and it helps me in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a win-win, kind of.
Yep.
Yeah. We just had a question from our friend and coworker, Holly. She just wrote in asking if you would like to address Ian Mitcham, and if so, what your message would be to him.
You know, I've thought about that a bit, sitting in the courtroom, but I know I can't say anything. So I really don't know what I'm going to say. We have to do a victim impact statement, and it'll be in there when I get that written.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody else wrote in and said that Allison was lucky to have such a loving father, and I could not agree more with that. And I know, you know, there's the trial aspect of things, and people tune in and they want to know about it, and it's hard. It's the hard part of this. But before you go, I just want you to explain to our viewers who Allison was, what you'll remember her most by, because we see those pictures and it just seemed like she was thriving. And so I want you to leave our viewers and listeners with just a little bit of who Allison was.
You know, Allison was always a team player. So she was a high school cheerleader. She did a lot of things at the school. She went to all the football games because she had so many friends. And it's part of the reason that she went into sales. Because people liked dealing with her.
Yeah.
And when she went into medical sales, I called her. I was in the medical industry at one time, and I said to her, "You can't just walk into the medical industry. It's you don't have any background or whatever." And 2 months later, she had a job in the medical industry. You know, it's just who she was. She never took no for an answer. And I'll give you one more example. We had a funeral in Minnesota, and 300 people came.
Oh my God.
And we had a memorial service in Scottsdale, and another 300 people came. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know 600 people, but 600 people wanted to pay their respects for Allison. So that's who she was.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's important that we keep that at the forefront through all of this too. I cannot thank you enough for coming on live. I mean, as if you don't already have so much going on, having to be in court every day. We so appreciate it. We're all here for your family and everybody, and we'll be covering this to the end. So you're almost there. I mean, I know it's been a long road, but you are an amazing person, and Allison would definitely be proud. No.
I think she would too.
I think she would too. Harley, thank you so much. We'll keep in touch, obviously, as the trial moves on and moves forward. And I look forward to staying in touch as we hopefully get to the end of this and justice for Allison.
Sure, Brianna, and I appreciate you doing this story.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll see you soon.